All right, everybody. It's the Always Be Cool podcast at the Summit Lending Studios, hanging out with your hosts, Bobby Kerr, Darren Copeland.
What's up, everybody?
We've got a really, really cool special guest today, a good friend of ours, somebody we've known for a long time, Mr. Jim Eisenreich.
All right, here we go, everyone. Born April 18th, 1959, from St. Cloud, Minnesota. Drafted in the 16th round of the 1980 draft by the Minnesota Twins. 15-year Major League career with the Twins, Royals, Phillies, Marlins, and Dodgers. National League Pennant winner with the Phillies in 1993. Won a World Series championship with the Marlins in 1997, which is awesome. Was part of one of the biggest trades in recent history. So in 1998, was sent to the Dodgers along with Bobby Bonilla, Charles Johnson, Gary Sheffield for Mike Piazza and Todd Zeile. He has his own foundation that helps children growing up with Tourette Syndrome. All around awesome guy. Welcome to the show, Jim Eisenreich. How you doing, man?
Thank you. Doing well.
Thanks for being here, man.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being here. So we were talking earlier, right before the show, that Bobby and I, when we do these interviews, we always joke that we do more research now than what we did studying in high school and college, right?
I resemble that.
Yeah, exactly. But we love researching people because one of the things that we saw that actually in 1989, now I know we were kids, Bobby was probably like 4 or 5 years old.
Come on now.
But in 1989, you were the Royals MVP on a team that included George Brett, Bo Jackson. I mean, some serious
star-studded
talent there, and you were the MVP in '89. Man, that's pretty impressive.
It was a nice honor, and like I told you, I think they just got tired of giving Bo all the accolades for the year. That was his really good year, and
I love it.
Right.
So, I mean, in those late '80s teams when you were in Kansas City, I mean, I remember you living in Eastern Jackson County. Were you living in Blue Springs then, or
yes.
around that? Because I remember, and this is hand to God, right? Like posters on the wall of George Brett, Bo Jackson, growing up a kid in Blue Springs. But I remember being in kindergarten, first, second grade, of being in Blue Springs and like seeing you in town and saying hi to you, and you saying hi to me.
Oh, just like out and about,
like out of like Quick Trip or whatever,
sure.
And thinking that it was so cool. I mean, I know a lot of the guys lived in the area at the time, but I didn't really see them or interact with them as a child. So the few times that I got to see you as a kid, it was a big deal. And at the time, it's not a surprise that you were the team MVP because, I mean, you were awesome. I mean, and it didn't matter like who else was on the roster. You were a guy, and you were a great guy. So it was really cool. I wanted to share that story with you.
Well, thank you. And, actually, all 4 of my kids went to Blue Springs High School.
Yep.
And I think you went to South,
I
right?
did, yes, sir.
I'll try not to hold that against you. But anyway, so, it's and I was very active in the kids' stuff and, still am when I can.
Yeah,
right.
They're all adults now.
Yeah,
I remember, and this was even before we connected and became friends in recent years, but this was probably 10 or 15 years ago. I was at a Quick Trip on the north side of Blue Springs, and I saw you, said hi. I was like, hey, Jim, good to see you. And you were nice as could be, and I remember getting in the truck and, like, texting, like, Craig, and Joey. I'm like, oh, my gosh, I just saw Jim Eisenreich. That's really cool.
And he said hi to me. I'm so awesome. That's so cool.
Simple pleasures, right?
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So talking about, kids and growing up being a kid. So when you were growing up, so did you grow up your entire childhood in Minnesota?
Yeah, I actually St. Cloud, Minnesota for the first 30 years, and I've been here in Kansas City, mainly Blue Springs, for the last 30.
So obviously, a lot of guys that, growing up and they're super studs and, whether it's baseball, football, or whatever, was there any other sports that you really enjoyed playing as you were growing up as a kid?
I was a hockey player.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
hockey.
And I couldn't shoot a basketball worth a darn, so I played hockey. And actually, I love playing hockey. High school hockey is huge, as you can imagine.
Sure.
And we actually had a little rink in our backyard that my dad would flood every winter once we got cold enough. And
that's cool.
And so we were out there morning, noon, and night. And I honestly, I probably liked hockey better in high school than baseball.
No kidding.
Yeah. You probably played it more.
We did.
I mean, you don't play much baseball in the northern states.
Baseball just seemed like it was out there. The Twins were our team, my team, and they're in Minneapolis and just it's too far away. But we watched them. We loved the Twins.
Sure.
But hockey was more relatable. So I never really dreamed that baseball was, potentially going to be my job.
Right.
And Hockey was what I liked to play.
Relatable because you like to hit people, or like what made it more relatable?
No, honestly, I was a little guy, but I could skate. I was a playmaker type, and I actually had more offers to go to college to play hockey than baseball, which
Really?
there weren't very many of either. But I was a good skater. But as I got out of college, I didn't play college hockey, just played baseball. As I got out, I realized that now the college players are, the old traditional or stereotype of hockey players was your forwards are your skaters, right? Puck handlers, you're the playmakers. The defensemen are the big guys that keep the opposing team out of their goalie's net,
Right.
And so that's kind of how it was. But as I got to be later in college and out of college, the forwards were now big and still fast.
Right.
And now the defensemen were bigger and they were fast.
Right.
And so it became, it was a very physical
Saw the
game.
writing on the
Yeah,
wall.
everyone
Yeah,
got
it's,
faster.
as much as I like to skate, I'd rather would hit a baseball than,
Right.
Then
than
get hit by a
Yeah,
defenseman.
Exactly.
So what point was it? Was it in high school at some time during one of your, like a sophomore, junior year or something? But at what point were you like, hey, you know what? I think I'm probably going to go down this route of playing baseball instead of hockey?
Yeah, honestly, it was probably my senior year, but I didn't really think anything beyond college either way. Like I said, I had the college hockey offers, and I didn't think that was realistic to do both. And
Sure.
I think I knew probably from the start baseball was a better choice for me, but I was honestly going to school to go to school, and get a degree and get a job. I didn't foresee baseball as something post-college.
Well, and clearly you had a really good college career because, getting drafted in the 16th round is nothing to sneeze at because, back then, I think they still had like 60 or 70 rounds or something crazy.
As many as they wanted.
Right, yeah, as many as
Yeah,
they wanted.
that's
So,
right.
I mean, did you have an inkling, were the Twins talking to you or some of the other teams talking to you as you were in your college career? And you're like, were you kind of like, okay, I think I might get drafted after all?
Yeah, and that kind of answers the question you were asking about when I kind of knew. As a junior in college, we had a good team, a good season. One of my teammates, and I don't know if you guys know him, but Bob Hegman.
Actually, I have a note about him in my notes, so keep going.
He's
Yeah.
lived here in Lee Summit
Yeah.
for a long time. Now he's recently moved to like Alabama or something.
But
so.
he was here for a long time.
Yeah, and he was my college teammate.
Okay.
And so we after we won our conference tournament with St. Cloud State, we're celebrating winning the tournament, and a scout came up to Bob and asked him, which is what they did in those days. So, I'm so and so from whatever team he was from. He said, "Would you be interested in playing professional baseball?" When Bob, he's a senior and he's graduating. It's like, yes,
Yes, I would.
And,
Yes, I would.
and then so the scout then said, "Well, what about your teammate Eisenreich? He's only a junior. You think he's interested?" And Bob is fairly quick-witted. It's like, "Well, you know what? He's standing right over there. You can ask him. He'll tell you." And so he did. He asked me the very same question. I always thought that was kind of weird, but he did. I know you're only a junior, but would you be interested in playing professional baseball?
That's fantastic.
The answer was very quickly, yes, sir.
Yeah, no one's asked me that question.
Let me get back
It's
to you.
like, yeah, that was the easiest question I ever had to answer.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, at least you're not in your 40s like, almost Bobby is and myself and, still hoping you're going to get signed out of Royals fantasy camp or something crazy like that. So, no, that's fantastic. So they ended up taking you in the 16th round. Tell us a little bit about that journey. You get drafted and then
Hometown team.
And you didn't spend a lot of time in the minor leagues.
No, I was really in a good spot at the right time, and as you'll find out through our conversation, I was there a lot in the right place at the right time. And
Right.
kind of the funny thing was with my teammate Bob in college. We kind of knew what the draft day was. It was June 7th, 1980. So we had been taking batting practice, and throwing to each other and getting ready, and thinking we might play a little summer ball, but we just we knew it was coming. So we said, let each other know when we get call if we get a call. So I got the call on that morning, late in the morning. My mom answered the phone, which was still on the wall.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
With
It's
the
like
rotary.
the dial,
Exactly. So it's for you. It's someone from the Twin Cities. Inside, and my mom's a baseball fan, but she doesn't know all the details.
Sure.
So I got on the phone, and started talking to the guy. He said, "I'm so-and-so from the Minneapolis Tribune newspaper." I thought, okay, this sounds kind of like my college teammates are pulling a prank on me, is what I thought. And anyway, after talking to him for a couple of minutes, I realized, okay, wow, this is real. I said, I was drafted in the 16th round by the Twins. And so the hometown team.
So that's how you found out you were drafted, was by the newspaper calling you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
But this gets funnier, because then I said, what about my teammate, Bob Hegman? And the guy said, you know what? The Royals got him earlier in the 16th round.
So same round.
Yeah. And so I got off the phone, and the story there was I told my dad, who was in the garden, my dad and I. That was the deal. It was my dad and I. I didn't make it. It was him and I.
Cool.
And so I went in, called Bob, and told him that I was drafted by the Twins. I said, had you heard anything? And I didn't tell him that I already knew. And so he said, no. He was kind of a little bit bummed, I think. And so later that night, I called again, anything. And he said, no. Next day he calls me, he said, yeah, I was drafted in the 16th round by the Royals. It's like, yeah, I know. And he kind of gave me a hard time. Anyway, so that was that. And of course, he's drafted by the Royals, and this is 1980. That was the Royals World Series year, right?
Yeah.
And so he was with them, and Bob ended up spending about 7 years in the minor leagues. Got one call up to the Royals here. I think he played third base for 1 inning. Didn't get a ball. Wow. Didn't get the bat. Was sent back to Omaha, and then was done. And then I think writing was on the wall for him, so he ended up being a minor league assistant coordinator.
Right.
So me with the Twins had all their high-priced guys leaving town.
Yeah.
They were just, and so
Right place, right time.
exactly. And so I spent, like you said, a year and a half in the minors. The first year's rookie ball in Elizabethton, Tennessee. And the second year was Wisconsin Rapids in the Midwest League.
Okay.
And then, just because of the way things were with the Twins, I get invited to the big league spring training, along with Ken Herbeck and Gary Gaetti, and the whole.
Was Kirby Puckett one of them?
He
too?
was not there. No,
Okay.
he was a couple years later.
Okay.
But so yeah, and so as fate would have it, I was brought north to open the Metrodome.
Wow.
That's
So,
amazing.
We look at the dichotomy of your situation and Bob's situation, right? Like drafted essentially at the same time,
Yep.
right? Divisional opponents, and you've got right place, right time, opportunity opens, Bob's blocked at third base by this guy named
I don't even remember, but
Brett
I think
something.
he was there for a while.
He was there for a while. Like, he's obviously not going to have an opportunity there. So, you could have been drafted by the Royals or, and vice versa. So that it's just incredible to think about those opportunities that just happen to be there sometimes. That's special.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
special. So you mentioned your dad, and obviously that's a special relationship.
Yeah.
And for you to say, Dad and I made it.
Yeah, my mom and dad were the biggest sports fans, baseball mainly, but my dad loved sports. My dad was a World War II vet, and he played, fast pitch softball, played slow pitch softball, and he was a teacher, counselor at a penitentiary.
Okay.
Wow.
So he had a different job, never brought the job home,
Sure.
but whenever he got home, he'd play catch with me, and my younger brother and my sister, or whoever, was available, and he'd take me along to his softball games when he was older, and so it was just one. We love our sports.
Right.
The other thing is that rink he made in the backyard. And here's where I kind of get on your Dolphins. I'm still a Viking fan.
Hey, they're
deep
playing
down.
this year.
And, so we'd be out in the rink during our Christmas vacation and breaks, and of course Sunday afternoon when the game was on, my dad would tap the window once in a while and put the score on the window for us.
Oh,
So,
that's cool.
That's awesome.
and had the neighbor kids all over. Anyway, that's a big deal. So when my dad said I threw too hard, he stopped playing catch, and so then my mom took over. My mom was
Your
a
mom
little.
actually took over.
My mom was younger than my dad.
Wow.
Right.
And so, but we loved our sports, and so when I got drafted, that's why my mom said, you need to go out and tell your dad. He was in the garden. I made a joke about him setting the standing long jump record because his face lit up. He was like, "We did it," you know.
I was going to say, what was Dad's reaction? Do you remember? So, what did you say? Did you run out there and say, "Hey, Dad, guess what"? How did that transpire?
I basically did. I just said, "Hey, Dad," you know, and when we had a good, "Hey, Dad, Twins just drafted me." It's like he lit up and he said he came out and he was all excited, and you know, a couple of days later the scout comes over and we signed the contract, you know, and it's like it was cool. Yeah, it was a big deal.
It's special. I mean, the relationship with your dad and your mom and your whole family, but then the fact that it was the Twins. I mean, that to me just makes the story so much more incredible. How it doesn't happen very often.
No, and in some ways it was maybe a little bittersweet, but you know, and I tell you about my dad with the Vikings and football during the summer. The Twins they had a bear for a mascot.
Oh yeah,
it was and it was Ham's beer.
Okay,
you remember Ham's?
Oh yeah,
well,
absolutely.
Every night before the game on TV, they'd have this little ping pong ball at the Ham's beer. We're going to win, and I know the song.
Do it.
No, I can't do it.
Jim, come on.
We're going to win, Twins. We're going to score. Anyway,
right.
I can't.
That's perfect.
But there's a bear, and that must have been Ham's. I don't know.
Sure.
So the game was on every night, and we're outside playing, you know, as usual. Come by the front window, and game's on, and what's score, Dad? You know, so that was kind of it. It was a big deal.
That's
very
a huge
cool.
deal.
Well, you know, you're talking about family. I actually heard another interview that you did, and I'm paraphrasing, but you said that by you watching kind of the relationship of your mom and your dad, that they were the closest thing to normal. And am I saying
Absolutely.
that correctly?
Yeah.
And it was like a nice, just kind of steady rock for you growing up, because you got these two wonderful parents that loved you and cared and loved each other. And so maybe just talk a little bit about that relationship that they had, and then how it transpired, how it kind of boiled over into the family and taught you some really good life lessons. And then that'll be a great segue into discussing some of your challenges and why that was so important to have such great parents.
Yeah, and kind of I'll do the little bit of the backstory on my dad too. I said he was a World War II vet, and when he came back, he got married. Not to my mom. He got married to a lady, and they had I call them my two older brothers, but she died of cancer when she was like 28 or 29 years old. So my older brothers didn't have their mother, you know, at 7 and 2 or whatever age they were about that. And so my dad's parents, and then my dad is trying to work a job and take care of 2 young boys. My mom's parents lived next to my dad's parents. So grandparents lived next to each other.
How cool is that as a kid?
So
was that on purpose, or that just happened to be the case?
It just happened, is where they lived.
Wow.
So my mom, she was the youngest of 10 in a farm family.
I'm sorry, did you say 10?
10.
Okay,
Yes.
gotcha. Holy smokes.
Yeah, 10. Farm family.
Sure.
Yeah.
Catholic.
Okay, there you go.
So my mom babysat the 2 boys. So the joke is my dad eventually married the babysitter.
Oh.
So
That's amazing.
That's perfect.
and
I almost spit out my water.
That would have been classic.
and that's kind of the way it is. And so then I was my mom's first, and then we have a younger brother and sister, and we're all sports crazy. And it's a funny thing, but I asked my mom one time, because my dad passed away in 1990. So it's been a while.
Sure.
I asked my mom, so what'd you guys do on your honeymoon? You know, there's the older 2 brothers, and well, my mom, this is kind of funny, but they drove out east. They stopped in Chicago and Milwaukee and Cincinnati and Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and they went to ball games.
How amazing!
I said, "Are you
is
really?"
that?
I said, "Mom, the ball games are at night. What'd you do the rest of the day?" And
None of your business.
Basically, so we sat in the parking lot, waited for the games. That's
Wow.
yeah, they watch games all the time, any
That's
kind of game.
fantastic.
My dad would sit on the couch watching a boxing match, and he's like, you know, just trying to get his shoulders into it.
Right.
He's just a sports
Crazy.
fan.
He was just into it.
They were. So
cool.
to answer your question, a long way around, they were tremendous. And each of my, you know, we could imagine my 2 older brothers losing their mother early. My oldest one, he was in trouble. I mean, he was.
Sure.
They went to Catholic grade school, which we all did, but he was a little rebel, you know. And my dad was always trying to make sure things were all right. Well, he turned out really good,
Good.
So anyway, my parents were always there. And then with my issues that I had that started when I was little in school, didn't know what they were. So that's why I always call them issues. I don't call it Tourette yet until I didn't know.
Sure.
So, and I went to the Catholic grade school where I had nuns for teachers, and the old stereotype was kind of
It's true.
real.
And they weren't
Yeah.
really understanding probably. They were
No,
just
they didn't.
heard
But
about the book, right?
but they had a lot of respect for my dad, and so my dad would he brought me to the doctor, to the hospital. I mean, can tell you how many times, And the only diagnosis that ever came out of it was, well, Jim has these habits, and he'll grow out of them probably. And so anyway, and so well, I never really grew out of them, but anyway, they were there doing everything they could, and I always looked at my dad as this great, big, strong man who could do anything. And the one thing that he couldn't do was fix me, and he didn't know how. It was something that it drove him nuts. But what he did was he treated me like my brothers and my sister. I was just a normal kid. At least that's what I wanted to be.
Sure.
And so I was treated that way, and very loving, church-going Christian. My mom always had a prayer book with her, and it's kind of what we do. And
Right.
so I had a good, solid foundation, a good home base, and it worked out.
Did your dad vocalize that with you, that he was frustrated or sad that he couldn't, quote unquote, fix you, like you said? So how did you know that it was really frustrating for him?
He could not. My dad, like I said, he was that age. They did not say anything.
World War
That
II,
was-
everything was internal.
They didn't talk
Yep.
about anything.
What was funny, though, is not funny, but it was maybe ironic. But when I went to my first minor league team in Elizabeth, in Tennessee, every Sunday night, we stayed with families. So
Okay.
I'd use their phone, and I'd call home, call collect. And so once we got, a regular Sunday evening call, we started to say to each other, "We love you." My dad could start, and he kind of him and ha. It's like, and "We love you," and he never could tell that to my brothers, older ones.
That's a huge deal.
It was a
for
big
man
deal,
like that.
and then
right.
it became automatic. It's like, and you could just tell. But to answer your question about him, verbalizing or vocalizing, he didn't say it to me straight up. But after years, I look at all the newspaper clippings that when my mom passed away, I had all the stuff. It's like my dad was talking to reporters about, I don't know, he's never been in trouble. He doesn't drink. It's like all these things, and it's like you could tell he was a little frustrated just by the tone of how he talked to those people. So
Yeah, exactly. So at what point, you spent, the first couple of years with the Twins, and you're battling that. So at what point did it come to where, hey, I just need to chill out for a little bit and really get this figured out?
It was okay. So I played 2 years in the minor leagues.
Sure.
And then I got invited to the Twins, opened the Metrodome, did all that, played basically a month and a half, and played really well, but I knew deep down there was, stuff.
Sure.
So when I came out of the games, the Boston series is always the one that everybody remembers. Got back to, I guess, 3 days in a row. I came out of the game early, and then went to a hospital in Milwaukee because that was the next part of our trip. Anyway, got back to Minneapolis, went into the hospital. I still hadn't heard the name, hadn't heard anything about it. It was considered a mental problem or behavior or something like that. I always make a joke that I was diagnosed with every phobia there is. Fear of open spaces, fear of closed spaces, fear of this, fear of that. It's like, okay, and I didn't
Just
know how to
grasping for straws to try to put a label
Yeah,
on.
because they didn't know.
Yeah, and I didn't know how to explain it. I could never explain or have them understand that I've been doing these things since I was like 6 or 7 years
Right,
old. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So so that's kind of when, although I was out for most of the rest of the '82 season, came back in '83 into spring training, and tremendous spring training, and played 2 games, and that's when I I left after 2 games. I said, I'm not right,
Mm-hmm.
so I left again. But then came back in '84 again, and I don't know. I guess hadn't convinced myself yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I left in '84, that's when it's like, okay, I need to get something right. And somewhere along the line, I heard the name Tourette Syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
and part of that was really getting a big weight lifted off my shoulders, knowing that there's a name to what I did, but probably more so that I wasn't the only one, which is what I thought as a kid.
Sure.
And probably most importantly is that there's help.
Right.
I didn't know what that entailed, but I was going to find out.
Well,
And
that had to be just like a tremendous monkey off your back to be like, hey, I'm not the only one out here dealing with this.
Right.
Yep.
Because you kind of blazed the path for even in the early '80s, if there were some things off, people didn't really talk about it or didn't really want to come out and talk about it. We've interviewed a lot of people during these podcasts, and if people were dealing with personal things or maybe they were having issues with alcohol or something like that, people wouldn't talk about it. They would just magically go on the disabled list.
Exactly.
Right.
No, you're right.
Yeah, and they had to pull a hammy or strain a hammy or something like that. So that had to be a tremendous relief. But what was it like to finally get it diagnosed, get some treatment? Because once you got that under wraps, I think the Royals had put a waiver claim in. But go ahead.
Before we jump to the treatment thing, I got a question. So you said you called them like things, like stuff. You were going through this stuff as a young person. What was it that? Well, maybe first, for the listeners that aren't familiar with the story. What were some of the things that you were dealing with as a young person to where you knew that something was not quote unquote usual or normal?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, we now would know they're called tics. Tourette, a lot of people have different tics. So, for me as a young kid, I would blink my eyes. I mean, really fast.
Like repeat it, just
yeah. And I always sat in the front of the class because of the seating chart. Eisenreich, the front of the alphabet.
Right.
And I never liked that, but nevertheless, that's where I was at. So I blinked my eyes, and then eventually I would like sniffle like I had a cold, or kind of clear my throat a little bit, like I've always got a cold, and then I would shrug my shoulder. I mean, I just seemed like I was constantly moving, or making some kind of noise. And we know now that there's 2 different kinds of what we call tics. One's motor, means you move, and one's vocal, means you hear something. And most people that have heard of Tourette, they may have seen a special on TV or a documentary or something. And the sensationalized part of the vocal is when they do the blurting out of a curse word or some kind of, inappropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's very few people have that, and I did not have that. So that was what I did as a young kid, and I've learned too that it seemed they kind of wax and wane. So as my eye blinking kind of went away, then I did more of maybe the throat clearing or maybe some movements, and they just so they would cycle, but there was no real reason for any of them or no straight pattern.
Right.
It's just here they come, here they go, and that's what it is.
Right.
So what was it that? Because obviously we'll call them tics. So you have your tics, and you make it to the major league club, right? You're playing Major League Baseball. You've been dealing with it since you were a young person. What was it that you think magnified it during those Boston and Milwaukee series in order for you to say, okay, I have to seek help?
That's a tremendous question. It really is, because everybody asks me that, and only way I can answer is that as a young kid, baseball or hockey or whatever sport I was playing was kind of my relief, my outlet from dealing with it. But if I go back to when I was sitting in the classroom in front, I was a decent student, but I wasn't as good as I wanted to be.
Well, probably because you were
Because I
focused
was-
on what was
well,
happening in your body.
And I didn't like what I was doing. So I was trying to, I would count to myself and okay, stop. I'd watch the clock, and I couldn't wait for the end of the hour.
It's exhausting.
And so that's what I did. I tried to hide it, but I couldn't do that. Well, I couldn't do it all the time. So when I got to, like I said, sports in general was my outlet. And even though I still did those things, they weren't that big a deal. So when I got into the big leagues, the stadiums are full, And for whatever reason, I started thinking that, okay, I wonder if they're watching me play ball or if they're watching me do all my stuff.
So you were kind of getting in your own head because,
yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine, Jim, being out in center field or being on a playing field and there's 40-some thousand people. I mean, that causes my anxiety just to go through the roof. I can't even imagine what that would be like because you're thinking, hey, are these people watching the game or are they just staring at me the whole time?
And that's true. But the weird thing is that whenever a ball was hit, then I'm
Snap
back
right
in.
out
I
of
can
it.
go get it. Because I'm not thinking of what I'm doing. I'm still doing them, but it's not that big a deal. So I
You're just
never
reacting.
missed a ball because I had a tick, or I never, swung at a pitch
Right.
and missed because I was.
I've heard you actually talk about this, and I'm sure some people listening to this are asking the question like, oh, if he like a fastball is coming at him, like, and he has a tick, what happens? Or a fly ball is going to him, and what happens? But I've heard you explain this in other interviews that there were even times that you could essentially, and actually you mentioned it when you would count down or whatever, but you could almost stop the next one from happening until a certain amount of time passed. Is that correct?
And for whatever reason, we can focus for a short amount of time, and I don't know why. They used to kind of explain what a tick is, like it's an itch. You have an itch on your back or whatever, and you don't want to do it because everybody will see you do it, but then you have to do it.
Right.
And that's
But you might be able to put it off for a couple of seconds.
Yeah. So you're in a batter's box. And fantasy camp's the same. The pitcher gets the ball. Total time is maybe 10 or 15 seconds.
Sure.
They get on the rubber. They get the sign. They throw the ball. You either swing or you take it. Right. So if you don't hit it, you back out of the batter's box, and that's when you got another 5 or 10 seconds. Right. And so that's how I could explain it.
Just
It's like,
routines, yeah.
Right.
yeah. So you go back in and you can focus for the 10 or 15 seconds.
Right, and you're actually relaxed and you're just doing what you're great at, right? You're either running down, catching the ball, throwing it, or hitting, and you're not thinking about it.
Right.
Right.
And we're in the outfield, that baseball outfielders
Too
get
much time to
pretty
think.
boring. Yeah. And so rather than, I was paying attention, but when you're moving all around and trying to stop, just, then you mostly get embarrassed. For me, that was it. All the ticks I did, the noises, they were just embarrassing, because it's not normal.
Sure. So and I think I cut you off from answering the question, but was there anything about those two series that just magnified it all? That said, like in Boston, Milwaukee, like, oh my gosh, I've got to do something about this. Enough for you to essentially take 3 years off. Was there something that triggered?
I don't know. I think it just got bad enough where it's like, okay,
like that was just
Uncle,
the
I
escalation
quit.
of
Yeah.
it.
Right.
Yeah, I had had enough. I didn't know why. I'd never had that much trouble, and it wasn't because of Boston or actually Milwaukee. I never even got on the field, but I didn't think it was because of that. And I've been back there since, to play and all the other places. But I'd had enough, and maybe that was the good Lord's way of saying, okay, here we go. Now let's move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's time to get fixed.
So back to now the original what
right.
you were saying.
So let's talk about that. So that 3-year gap there, and then the Royals put in a waiver claim for you, which is one of the best moves the Royals have ever done, right? So how did that transpire? Did they know that you wanted to get back into the game? Did you take like those 3 years working on yourself?
Is this full circle with
Right.
Bob?
Yeah,
Right.
it is, and it's everybody, we're all in our place for a reason. It seems like. But so yeah, I was being out. I stayed in shape. I went back to school because I hadn't finished my college years yet. But I played like 4 nights of slow pitch softball, and then I played what we call in Minnesota's amateur baseball. Occasionally, and then so I was in shape. And somewhere along late summer of 1986, which was I was completely out of pro ball in 85 and 86, completely out, nothing. And so Bob called me and he just said, "Hey, just checking in, how you doing?" And he did that every once in a while. And our conversation led to, I'd like to try again if I can. And he just said, "Well, I don't know. We can see what happened. I'll talk to, John Schulholz was
Was
the
a GM.
then, and Bob was second in command in the minor leagues. So it was late in the year. The Royals came to Minnesota for a series, and I was at the game. I don't know why I was there early, but I was sitting behind home plate. Just nobody was in the stands yet. And John Schulholz comes up to me and says, "Hey, Jim, how you doing?" It's like, doing okay. So Bob says, "You'd like to play again." And I said, "Yeah, I'd like a chance." And that was it. He said, "Okay." And he walked away. He couldn't probably say anything more.
Sure.
And so when that happened, I was advised to ask the Twins for my release.
Okay.
Because they still had control of me. So I did that, and they did. It was a no-brainer for them to do that.
Sure.
And so because that was 1986, the Royals won the World Series in 85. So the waiver wire, the Royals are the very last team to pick. So
Right.
it goes through all the other teams, and then the Royals selected me. And, Bob never really told me who he talked to, but that's where it came from. And so they spent $1. Is that legal?
Right.
Yeah.
They spent $1 for me, and so, and I was called by both John Schulholz and Bob just to, this is what we're going to do, and I wasn't really sure it was going to happen. They were inviting me to their big league spring training, but I was probably going to go AAA or even AA, and it turned out I went to AA. But yeah, it was came January, and the contract was there, and signed it. And one thing I also asked Bob back during the summer was that my younger brother's 5 years younger than me, and he was a good ball player.
Okay.
And I always felt, and he was a good college ball player. He never got drafted, I think, because of me. I think they maybe thought that he was similar to me. And
Really?
Yeah. And he's the direct opposite. He's outgoing, and he was, together, and he was a good player. So Bob must have heard that somewhere in the background, and they actually offered my little brother, actually signed him to a minor league contract to play with the Royals A-ball team in Appleton, Wisconsin.
Nice.
So that was kind of cool. And so I'm at the big league spring training with the Royals in Fort Myers. So the last year in Fort Myers for the Royals.
That's right.
And the minor leagues were in Sarasota. I think it was, Sarasota. So my little brother comes down. We got to have a couple of
That's
weeks,
cool.
being together. So anyway,
That's
that's where it happened.
So you started in AA, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then how long were you in AA before you started getting the call up back to the major leagues? And, to even start back in the minor leagues, did you feel better being out in the field? Not that you were probably taking some medication or getting the Tourette's under control. Was that comfort level coming back?
It was, but in spring training, I actually hurt my elbow.
Okay.
So when I was sent to AA and we actually went to Memphis for the season, I didn't play in the outfield. I just DH. Yeah, and I don't know if that was because of my elbow, because it had slowly been getting better, or if they just want to let me hit, not really knowing where I was at with that.
Sure.
And so, and I mean, that half a season AA was as good as it got for everything I hit was a hit.
You're just smoking it
It
down
was
there.
just crazy.
The ball looks like a beach ball.
Yeah, so I got a call from John Bowles, who was Bob's next up for the minor leagues. He said, "I think Mr. Schulholz says we need to get you out of there, so we'll probably let you know." So John Schulholz calls me about a week or two later and says, "So where do you want to go? AAA Omaha or here to Kansas City?"
Was he being funny?
And no.
He was not being.
No, he was not, because they did not know
They wanna rush you?
how comfortable I was.
they didn't want to
I
rush
still
you.
get people asking me if I'm comfortable. It's like,
Sure.
that's okay.
Sure.
I said, I'd like to come to Kansas City.
If it's okay
And
with
so,
you,
yeah.
I'll just come to
And
majors.
so we got off a road trip, and 3 o'clock in the morning, and our manager, Bob Schaefer, he says, hey, going to the big leagues. It's like, cool.
Awesome.
And so there it was, and it was, late June when I came here.
Wow.
And, I pinched hit a few times and DH'd a couple times the rest of the year, and that was kind of what I did. So.
Right.
Well, while we're on the topic of the Royals, were there any teammates that you had during those years, and you had some great years with the Royals, that like really said, Jim is like my guy? Were there guys that just really embraced you, knowing what you went through or not knowing what you went through to get there? Because obviously you faced some pretty large hurdles.
Yeah, and so the story that I will always tell, the first day I walked into the Fort Myers clubhouse for spring training, I'm walking in looking for my locker, and Frank White comes up and says, "Hey, Jim, welcome to the Royals."
That's cool.
Cool.
And it was, so Frank was the one guy who had no reason to do that, but that's what he did. We were on one of our first road trips out to Oakland, California, and playing those two teams, and come down for breakfast, and Frank's sitting there having coffee by himself, and I'm going in for some breakfast, and he says, "Hey, Jim, come and have a seat,"
So he just made you feel welcome right off the bat.
Right, and still has. He's
That's
still, I went through a divorce a few years ago. Frank calls me up, let's go golfing,
That's cool.
That's
So
who
you
he
guys,
is.
you guys have kept fairly close over the
Yeah,
years then.
yeah, we sure have.
That's great.
I think it's really cool. We get to know a lot of the alumni guys, and when they're still buddies after 40, 50 years, like the stories that Duke and George and Jamie tell about growing up in Southern California, knowing each other for 55 years, and actually longer than that. But it's
They
just
still
really,
like each other,
and they
too.
like each other.
Yeah.
Well, at least they
so
say
love.
so on camera.
Yeah, right?
No, that's good.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So with the Royals, so the final year with the Royals was 92.
That too.
92. So
And you were with the period of the Royals, so you were kind of in between. After, the Royals come off the 1985 World Series, right?
Yep.
You were still on some really good teams, the late 80s, early 90s. But talk about, I think that's where Bobby was going, being in the right place at the right time. So after 92, you were a free agent with the Royals, correct?
Right.
And then were the Phillies one of the first teams calling and saying, "Hey, Jim, we'd really like for you to come play with us"?
There were only two teams that were calling.
It's better than zero.
Yeah.
Better than zero.
It
right?
was, yeah. And one of them was actually the Braves.
okay.
And John Sherholtz was
Yeah,
now the
'Cause
Braves.
he was
GM.
down there now.
Right.
Wow.
But the Braves only offered me a minor league contract, where the Phillies had offered a major league contract. And so, and of course now I'm married and I have a child, and it was a little bit different. We thought, let's go to Philly. And of course, people that know me, I'm from St. Cloud, Minnesota,
Right.
a little small
different than
town
Philadelphia.
Midwest. You're kind of going into like little New York, you know? It's like-
Exactly. And that clubhouse had some characters in there.
Oh, we'll talk about that.
yeah, we'll get to that.
And yeah, so that's what we did. The Braves were a tremendous team, but what were the chances of me being on the team? I was 34 years old when this was happening.
Okay.
So,
Makes sense.
as a part-time player, that's kind of, you're almost done.
Well, yeah, you got to
know?
think about all of the other things going on outside of just being a ball player. Like you said, you've got a family now.
Yep.
The situation has changed.
Right.
Yeah. So we went to Philly and couldn't have imagined,
What's going to transpire?
couldn't imagine. It was unbelievable.
So stay
Still-
there.
still
Yeah.
today.
Talk about it. Let's talk
Keep,
about
keep
it.
Well,
going.
In 1993, and you already said it, but you have John Kruk, Mitch Williams,
Right.
Darren Dalton, Kurt Schilling,
Dykstra.
Lenny Dykstra,
Dykstra.
Mickey Morandini, Mariano Duncan.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying
Wow.
to, Danny Jackson was my teammate.
Oh, that's
Oh,
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Danny Jackson. There's a whole bunch of guys, but Larry Anderson was an old guy. Our manager was Jim Fregosi, who was right with one of the guys.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Harry Callis was one of the announcers. And if you ever listen to all the old NFL films, that's
Yeah,
Harry's
that's
name.
him.
That's
It
Harry's
is?
voice.
No kidding.
We were one of the guys. I mean, it was weird.
Wow.
Richie Ashburn was one of, Richie was a player. You guys might be too young to know who Richie
I don't know, Richie. I don't know who
He
that
was
is.
a really good player for the Phillies.
Cool.
But so anyway, and we started the year. I mean, it was freaky. The Phillies in '92, if I remember right, they were the last place team in the East.
Okay.
And so our little highlight video shows a couple of the players in the dugout in spring training. Mariano played with the the Reds when they won the World
Cincinnati.
Series
Yep.
in 90.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Derek
And
Davis.
so the little video is, I think we need to win another one that's showing the ring, It's kind of cool. And we started off, we were 17-5 in April
Wow.
and never
looked
gave up,
back.
never gave up our lead in the division.
Because the Phillies were in last place the year prior. Blue Jays had won the World Series, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Right. And
Yep.
I believe this is still early 90s, so we're talking 4 divisions, right?
Right.
Yeah,
That's
the
no
four
wild
wild
card.
card.
No, and
Right.
that's what's funny is the Braves were in the Western Division.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so we won the East. I guess we won 97 games.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Braves won 100 games or 102,
Mm-hmm.
and the second place team was the Giants.
So
Oh my
I
God.
And the
forgot that
Giants won
Braves-
100 games, and they're not in the
They didn't even
playoffs.
make
Yeah,
the
they didn't
playoffs.
make anything.
100 games.
Yeah,
I don't.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't remember that the Braves were in the West.
Yeah.
yeah, it was. Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
weird.
And so we played the Braves in the National League Championship
Mhm.
Series,
Mm-hmm.
and we beat them. We beat Greg Maddux in Game 6. And
That's
Those were some good
crazy.
Braves teams.
Yeah, they were.
Holy
Yeah.
smokes.
That had some amazing rotations. Now, 93, was that the year that another Kansas City and Joe Carter, was that,
Yeah.
was
That
that
would
the
be
year?
it. You
yeah.
can
That would
say
be
it.
it. You can say
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Sensitive
Yeah.
still.
Well, as a huge Royals fan growing up, Ewing Kauffman always had a thing for Joe Carter. So rumor for years and years was Joe was going to be a Kansas City Royal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we really thought that was going to happen. So, being a young kid, not seeing the Royals, essentially not making the playoffs for 8 years, right? And to see Joe Carter do something like that, it's just like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
just crazy.
And you know how good a guy Joe is.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, it's like I can't even, as a Philly person, I can't even dislike him.
right.
It is
right.
funny though.
You ever
Yeah.
you ever hang out with Joe and you guys are sitting down and people come up and be like, "Hey Joe, home run, World Series hero," and then not knowing that you're a Philly.
It happens a lot.
Does it?
Yeah, when we do events, at whatever we're at,
Sure.
we'll be close to each other, and people will come up and say, "Joe, can you sign the ball?" World Series
Hero.
ending, walk-off home run, and then after 10 or 15 people do that, I'll look at Joe and say, "Joe, are you paying these guys to say that?" Because they have
Right.
no clue that I
Right.
was the right
I
fielder
was on
for
the other
Phillies.
team. I was on the other team. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
So,
Well, so that one obviously didn't end up best case scenario for you, but things changed a little bit when you made your next stop.
We should have prepped it, Bobby. We got to be better than this. I mean, we should have told Jim to bring in his ring for
Oh my
97, right?
You don't happen to have it, right?
I don't.
Yeah,
no.
maybe I was hoping maybe like Bloom Up came and brought his finger that he cut off.
Oh yeah, sure
I was
about that.
maybe you
Oh, my
brought your
gosh.
World Series.
No.
We'll do better next. So going back to that. So again, right place, right time, with another amazing team. So how was that being on the World Series team?
How did
with
it come
the-
about?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, after the '93 season with the Phillies, I mean, they signed me right away, and I had probably my best 4 playing years with the Phillies.
And
You
you
know,
were
it-
already 35?
Yeah, 39. Yeah. I was.
That's incredible.
I was 38 in 1996. It was one of those. Everything I swung at was a hit.
I mean, that's
It
like
was
me
crazy.
playing in the major leagues right now
Yeah,
and having
right.
like the best years.
Doesn't that just blow your mind?
It
We
was
can't even
crazy.
get through a week of fantasy camp.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Don't feel bad. We did this for a living.
Sure, right.
So, but September 1st of '96, I actually fouled a pitch off my foot and broke my foot. So I had a chance for the batting title.
No
So,
kidding.
Yeah. So then this other guy that I don't know, Tony Gwynn. I guess he had to win another one.
He was okay.
Anyway,
decent.
so after that, Jim Leland had just signed with the Marlins as the new manager, and I was again a free agent with the Phillies. And for some reason, I don't know what my agent and I were thinking, but I didn't want to leave Philly. I love Philly.
Okay.
People were great to me, and I loved the team. And even though 95, 96 weren't as good as the first 2 years,
Sure.
but personally, I was enjoying the city and all. Believe it or not, it's
Right.
crazy for.
Well, rabid fans, and
Yeah.
especially if those rabid fans embrace you.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
an
one of them.
amazing place to
I
be.
found the key to all that too. But anyway,
Okay.
we the Marlins had called and offered a 3-year contract. Wow. 38 years old or 37, and they offered me a 3-year contract.
A 3-year guarantee.
And well, the third year wasn't totally. It was a buyout option too for the team.
Sure.
But would have been 40, and so I spent 2 weeks going back and forth with the Phillies trying to figure out, why wouldn't they just give me a little extra?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't. And so eventually I signed up the Marlins, and so that's another one of those right place, right time. The decision. Why didn't I? I'd have easily said yes to the Phillies again. So we get to the Marlins, and of course Jim Leyland he's second to none as a manager, and I just thought I had a really good manager with Jim Fregosi. It's a Jim thing. So anyway, we went through the year, and of course you already mentioned names: Gary Sheffield and Bobby Bonilla, Charles Johnson, Kevin Brown was a pitcher.
Oh yeah,
our closer
Kevin
was
Brown.
Rob Nen. We had Moises Alou and Devon White, and it was a pretty good team. But we're still in the East Division now, and the Braves are in the East Division now. So
and it's important, I think, to note the Marlins had only been a team for 5
years. This is the 5th year.
Yeah,
correct.
Expansion team.
Yeah, and now what was another benefit though is that in '97 was the first year having a wild card.
Okay.
I think. So anyway, we did not win the division. The Braves won a division, and in the National League it was the Giants were the trying to think of how that works now.
Yeah.
There were more teams than I'm thinking.
Right.
There were 2 divisions. Anyway, we ended up playing the Braves in the National League Championship Series again, and won again.
That's amazing.
And then go to Cleveland for the World Series.
And it was tropical weather during the World Series. It was beautiful, right?
Games 1 and 2 in Miami were 80 and 85 degrees, and games 3, 4, and 5 started about 32 degrees and flurries.
Snowy.
The first,
Holy smokes.
I was the DH. That 97 was the first year of the DH. No, I forget what it was.
Well, I think it was whatever home park was is what they followed the rules. So how did some of your other teammates, did they kind of struggle with that, going to that cold weather climate after a 50-degree swing like that?
I don't know. We wore the face masks, and
I remember seeing it's so vivid in my mind.
So Edgar Renteria was our shortstop,
Right.
And he obviously
He
got
was okay.
the big hit, But yeah, we managed. I mean, it was they're playing in it too, so that was our attitude.
It's true.
What I thought was really cool was you see that famous walk-off by Edgar Renteria, right? And you see Craig Counsell going, from third base to home, and he's going crazy, right? But yours truly was on second base, correct?
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you literally had a front row seat. So did you actually see that ball coming up the middle from Edgar off the bat?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because I had to touch third base.
Right.
Right.
If I don't touch third base, they can throw it over there. It's force out.
Exactly. Exactly.
So yeah, I had it going through my head too about. So I got to be part of 2 World Series walk-offs.
That's amazing.
That's
unheard of.
On both sides,
Right.
too.
Right.
Winning and losing.
Yeah.
So
I take it this second one was a much better feeling. Than,
It was a little bit better, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
well,
It was fun.
and let's not forget, you hit some big hit. You had home runs in the World Series.
I did.
Right.
Yeah.
Like dream come true.
And that was probably, I don't know if you heard this part of the story, but those were probably the coolest things for me. I hit 52 total home runs in my 14 years.
Uh-huh.
1 year I hit 10. And I got 2 bonus ones, as I say, in the World Series. And the first one with the Phillies was in Toronto. Dave Stewart. So it was game 3, and I hit a 3-run homer, and we won the game. So the way I set it up is the ball barely made it over the right center field fence, and they called it Sky Dome then. And so it went in between the first row of seats and the fence. Our bullpen is in right field. Our bullpen coach was underneath the bleachers, and he had the ball. So by the 5th, 6th inning, I had the ball in the dugout in my hand.
Wow.
Okay. So the cool thing was after the game, I do the post-game press conference. And I probably talk 5 minutes about the home run. and then an hour about Tourette. Okay?
Nice.
So then, just remember that. So we're in Toronto. Fast forward 4 years, we're in Cleveland for game
3.
3 or 4.
game 3. Yeah, I should have said Toronto's was game 2. So in Cleveland for game 3, I'm the DH. Sixth inning, I hit a 2-run homer, it was a solo homer, and I crushed it.
Right.
It was really cool. So I found out later that there's a couple guys that drove down from Toronto to watch the game.
Okay.
They weren't Marlin fans and they weren't Cleveland Indian fans, and so they caught the ball, and they, and when you're in a home park and your visitors hit a home run, you got to throw it back.
Right.
So they think the Indian fans were thinking that they needed to throw the ball back, where they weren't either.
Right.
Fans.
Yeah, they weren't
So-
fans. They're like, we're going to keep this.
So
thing.
they left in the 7th inning, after that, because they were going to fight.
Yep.
And so they started driving back to Toronto, about a 4-hour drive, listen to the rest of the game. So after the game, which we won again, was kind of a crazy game, I talked 5 minutes about the home run and then another hour about Tourette. So it kind of put it back on the map. Well, as I found out later, these two guys that were driving back to Canada, to Toronto, were listening to that, and one of them says to the other, "Do you think that's what my daughter has?"
Oh, no way.
He got home, told his wife, they looked things up, they brought their daughter to a doctor and said, yeah, she probably has Tourette. And he
What?
himself maybe had it too. Because
So it
he
could've
had all
been-
these things that
This
they
is the
never-
random guy that caught your home run ball,
Yes.
Unbelievable.
that left the game early to hear you on the radio.
Yeah. How about that?
Right place,
No.
right time.
That's
So
no
and
accident.
you know what's really weird is I had started my foundation in 1996.
Yep.
So this is 97
year.
when it happens. And up until then, I'd been to the national conferences. Well, I was getting invited to the National Canadian Conference
Okay.
in Toronto.
Oh, my gosh.
And I was told through the grapevine that I was going to be given my home run ball. But we all thought it was the home run ball from the Phillies versus the Blue Jays
Right.
back in '93.
Not the one in
And,
Cleveland.
and I knew I had that.
Yeah.
And so I had my secretary with the foundation with me, and we're at the dinner, and I said, I'm going to go to the restroom. And so when I go, figure out what's going on.
Right.
Right.
I came back and she's like bawling. It's like, she told me part of the story. It's like, oh boy.
Wow.
So then they gave me the ball. So I had both.
That's incredible. I was so glad you told that
Unbelievable.
story.
Unbelievable.
That's
So
amazing.
Yeah.
I've heard you say, and I think this is a perfect, time. We want to be respectful of your time today, but I've heard you say, or I've read you say, that you weren't really put here to be a ball player, and you were possibly here to share your testimony and your story about the things that you've gone through in life and be a voice and a light for a lot of people. Is that how you look at it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Baseball just became a platform. I'm just like anybody else. I'm here for a reason to do. I had the benefit of loving to play baseball and got to play on that stage. You guys know what it's like. It's just
Right.
fun.
Yeah.
Well,
And-
to be in that spot and to be the light to help so many people, Jim, that's amazing. I mean, by no means are we professional podcast people, but we've gotten to be, fairly good. And we've done a lot of interviews, but that right there was one of the best stories that we've heard. That
gave me chills.
That's goosebump type material. Right?
Well, it unbelievable. I mean, and I almost feel honored. Just I've been blessed to do the things I've been able to do. And I get to tell that story to some of the families that I talk to. And love doing it. And it's like I can see when I'm talking to the kids that the parents over there are the ones who,
Connecting.
it's okay. It's going to be okay.
Yeah,
And
it's gonna be
you'd be
okay.
surprised at who is called, wanting to know questions, where to go, just to get an answer for what their kids are going through.
So this is actually a great question, Jim. So like for anyone that might be listening to this, whether it's they might have friends or family or even themselves. Like, if someone thinks that they might have something like that, where would be a best spot for them as like a first step to maybe get some more information or figure out what's going on with them?
Well, you can first of all, nowadays you can Google anything, and you can find resources anywhere. My foundation, we have a website. It's actually not very good. I'll be honest.
Hey, it's okay. It's a website.
But
What is it?
You can. It's Tourette's.org, and so it's under my foundation. Jim Eisenreich Foundation for Children with Tourette Syndrome.
Right.
But you can get a lot of information. Basically, you want to go to your family doctor first and ask all the pertinent questions. Even mention the word Tourette. If, and sometimes the doctors don't have a clue what you're talking about, and some say, yeah, we heard about that. We'd like you to go see so and so
Specialist.
a neurologist mainly. And the thing about Tourette, there's such a wide range of how
Severity.
bad severity. Yeah. So I always make the kind of the scale of 10% of Tourette people or kids have what we call really bad, 24/7. They can't stop moving. They don't sleep. They have it's called carpolalia, where they curse involuntary. Then there's the other 10% on the other end that have tics or something, but it doesn't bother them in anything they do. Well, it's the 80% of us
They're
in the middle. And some of us need, different kinds of help. We could mental health help, medicine, nutrition, diet, exercise, a whole bunch of things. And because those are good things, but the bad thing is no one thing works for all of us, And it takes a little bit of time and
To
kind of
figure it out.
trial and error, see what works and what doesn't.
Right.
So
I think it's also important that because this is I think a miss. People assume it's called Tourette's Syndrome, but that's not the case. It's Tourette.
Yeah,
I've heard you say this several times.
yeah.
I
I don't correct anybody
no,
anymore,
no,
but
that's what
yeah.
it is. It's Tourette, named after the person who was the first to diagnose it. Is that it?
yes, yeah, Doctor whatever his name is,
Dr.
Yeah.
Tourette?
Big in the 1800s. I don't know.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Right.
I used to be able to say his name, but
Right.
Well, I mean, Jim, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Yeah.
This has been awesome, and also for those people, you can give yourself a plug. So your career these days, you're working for Premier Farm Realty Group. You've got a passion for the outdoors, so maybe just give a little bit about what you do and why you're doing it these days.
I just, one of my passions has always been hunting and fishing and outdoors, and I was very blessed and fortunate to play baseball, but I will tell you, the very first year in the minor leagues, the coach asked me, if this doesn't work out, do you have something to fall back onto? And they ask everybody that, at least they used to. And a lot of kids say, well, I'm going to make it,
Right.
And you like to think it's true, but, I made it, but then I was not there anymore, so I always felt like, okay, I can do something. Well, my passion was, is the outdoors. And that's what I went to school for. I could imagine myself, if I'd never played baseball, being in northern Minnesota, jumping into bears' dens in the winter and checking their blood. I mean,
Right.
that's how goofy I am. But that's what I like to do.
I love it.
And so when I got into real estate, almost one of my first couple of years out of baseball. And I was kind of green a little bit. Didn't really know what I was doing. Actually bought an office.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't intend to be an active agent or a broker. I wanted to just see the day-to-day, running of I love real estate.
Sure.
And one thing led to another, and eventually I came with this group, and their specialty is farms and land. Now we can do residential stuff too, but
Sure.
It gets me back out and walk farms and fields,
Right.
and
It
always
taps your passion.
there's
right?
always a recreational side to it. So
Right.
Cool. If
That's
somebody wants to
fantastic.
get a hold of you on that side of things, what's the best way to reach you?
just probably it's a difficult email, but my phone number.
Right.
You look up my name, and
Right.
either way, because I got that, my foundation. I still speak to schools.
Just
kinda-
Google Jim Eisenreich.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
easiest thing to do. My
Very
number's
good.
somewhere there.
Very
Yeah,
good.
Exactly.
So,
And Jim, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Yeah,
today.
it's been a pleasure.
That
We
was
really
a lot of
appreciate your
fun.
time.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
So,
All right, everybody. This has been the Always Be Cool podcast at the Summit Lending Studios, hanging out with our good friend Jim Eisenreich. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Guys, take care. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and listen to us on any podcast platform like Google, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
see you guys. Thanks for joining.
Take care. Have a great day.